Go.
I'm going to introduce William O'Neill, who's going to speak to us today from Albuquerque Ambulance. He's going to tell us about how the Albuquerque Ambulance Company uses process improvement in their daily management, including the Pulse, and also about a couple of the Greenbelt projects that they have done. And he is also a Greenbelt certified. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So, thanks for coming out early, everybody. Hopefully I'll keep you awake after that meal. That'll be a little bit of a challenge. So, we're going to talk about how Albuquerque Ambulance, as an emergency medical services provider, leveraged some of the process improvement tools and technology that was available to really get back on track with where we wanted to be, which is as an industry leader. For a long time, and Albuquerque Ambulance has been around for about 40 years, there was really no competition in the market. We did not have a process improvement mindset in either the administration or the field, and in fact those tools were completely foreign to us. So when we started picking things apart, looking at competition in the market and some of the innovation that's going to be necessary moving forward, it was a no-brainer. We were going to have a different tool set, and so very devotedly with the right people in the room, we decided to sit down and make progress on this. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Certainly, I'm guessing most of you are not clinical providers. That is my background as a clinical paramedic, and so if you have questions as we go, feel free to ask. There's a small enough group, I think we can probably handle things pretty easily. So, Albuquerque Ambulance, Bernalillo County in the metro area since 1972. So, roughly 800,000 residents now in the area that we're serving. We're contracted for Corrales, Albuquerque Metro, Bernalillo County, including the East Mountain area, which is a bit of a geographic challenge for us in terms of deployment, as I'm sure you can imagine. This is our 40th anniversary this year, which is very cool. We're actually having a celebration, in fact, at our new base on Wednesday. So currently we're dealing with about 98,500 requests for service annually. We share an emergency and non-emergency market because in a lot of ways insurance reimbursement drives what our business model looks like. We want to stay important in the community. That's the 911 response business, but insurance reimbursement for 911 work is a huge challenge. First, there's a large uninsured population in New Mexico. The second part of that is Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement are driven a lot of times by hospital admission. And so if you're not sick enough to actually be admitted from the emergency room, a lot of times your insurance provider will say, well, you didn't really need an emergency ambulance. That's at odds with our regulatory requirement, which is if you call us for service, we'll transport you to the hospital if you want to go. So kind of a little bit at odds. And like I said, so we're providing ALS level. That means we have paramedics on every ambulance that would respond to a call. So advanced life-saving capability and the specialized training that goes with that, including non-emergency service for not just the Presbyterian hospital system, but other hospitals in the state that are Presbyterian facilities, and basically every other non-emergency business, nursing homes, urgent cares, private homes, doctor's offices, all that kind of stuff. We've got a staff of about 300 EMTs, paramedics, EMDs, which are the emergency medical dispatchers. So I've got a core team, usually staffed between 5 and 6, that takes in that 98,500 calls a year and gets those resources out where they need to go, and also decides where the resources are deployed geographically in the state. Because as you could imagine, between the access to the west side, the East Mountains, and the Corrales area, we have to have the chess pieces, if you will, in the right place, depending on what the resources look like and the time of day, day of week. We also staff 2 critical care units. They have specialized training for cardiac balloon pumps, in addition to a transport ventilator and a much broader scope for medications. So for acutely ill patients, especially those in outlying hospitals, ACL is an example, Grants, Gallup area, Socorro, somewhere where you maybe live in a smaller community, you go into the hospital, basically at death's door, we can still get a ground transport paramedic unit to you, and a lot of times they have the exact same scope as what an air service could do. The cool thing is we don't have the same kind of parameters, the tight restrictions on when we can fly. The ground vehicle can respond and stabilize you, provide a lot of that treatment. And it's a fraction of the cost, as you might imagine, of flying in a helicopter or a fixed-wing aircraft. So the last thing, and I mention this because it's very important to us, we are a division of Presbyterian Hospital. Pres is the second largest employer in the state. We're the largest integrated healthcare network in the state, and that is very important to us because as we drive forward with innovation, that's going to allow us a whole new tool set. The traditional model and what we currently function on of you call 911, an ambulance responds to your house and takes you to the hospital. That is not where reimbursement is driving it. Obviously, healthcare reimbursement is going to continue to go down, and that's not what the market will really support. A lot of the care that's done in emergency rooms, especially in a state like New Mexico, is not emergency level care. It's primary care. It's outpatient care. And so as we move forward, we're going to be partnering with Presbyterian Home Health Care, the hospice program, and also doing an innovation on a project called Patient Navigation, where our integrated healthcare network is going to allow us to do something like show up to your house, do an eval, maybe teleconference a mid-level, a PA or a physician, and then make the right decision about your needs in terms of a physician consult, which may be we set you up on an appointment through scheduling at Presbyterian for an urgent care visit later in the day and make sure that you have some transport to get there. We may also look at a model where we're able to transport you to an urgent care where you would get more appropriate care for less cost. And of course, everybody knows the dollar's kind of driving where things go. So if we can get you a better deal that works better for us, that's a win-win, and that's some of the innovation that's coming in the future. You may have seen now for $60 at a kiosk in certain areas of the United States, you can see a physician. Blood pressure, vital signs, question and answer. It'll print you out a script. Go ahead and charge your healthcare services card, and it's a done deal. We're looking at a very similar model with the ambulance because that's where the market's going to go. Ambulance companies that are stuck in what we call the you call, we haul mentality will not be around in probably 5 or 10 years. And so we want to be positioned well, and being a division of Presbyterian, we think is probably going to give us a unique advantage in the industry. So, fortunately, this isn't my backyard anymore, because of course it's the end of the season, but, and this wasn't my backyard. But this is a good analogy for Albuquerque Ambulance. After nearly 40 years of not paying attention to how things were driven, except for clinical quality. We're all clinical providers, and so, you know, we spent training on intubation, we spent training on defibrillation, all the ACLS procedures, recertification, refreshers. What we didn't look at was process improvement. What we didn't look at was metrics. What we didn't look at was measures. You know, how can we tell how good we're doing? And this, in my mind, this is kind of a good analogy for the result, right? Leave it out there in the backyard and just see how it goes. This is what you end up with. Now we're at risk for competition in the market. There's a few other things going on. So the challenges that we have, multiple years running of a 6-digit budget deficit. While it's fantastic to be a partner with Presbyterian Healthcare Services, one of the things that you see when you work for a large organization is they're paying a lot of attention to who's coming in the black or who's coming in the red. And as much as they love us, because we are the community face of Presbyterian, we have our ambulances, basically a traveling billboard out in the community. I know you guys have all seen them all over the place. Our uniforms, etc. It's a difficult conversation to have with them if we're coming in 6 digits in the red every year about whether or not we're still of value to the greater organization. Our employee satisfaction was very low. An interesting paradigm, because paramedicine and emergency medical services isn't something people get into just on a whim. It's usually something they're very passionate about. And so what we ended up with was we had a group of employees who loved the job that they were doing and didn't really like doing it for us, because we hadn't really spent the time to look at what it was that they wanted, what would keep them happy, and measuring our workload, our financial responsibility, and their satisfaction kind of as a nice triangle to keep things balanced. So we had a very negative management culture from the top down. Our previous executive director was eventually retired out of the organization after multiple years of the budget deficit and also the employee satisfaction scores. And when I say low, I'm talking like 12th percentile, 16th percentile, the kind of things that are the lowest in the organization at Presbyterian, and also some of the lowest in the nation. So another driving force for us to look at improvement. That also, of course, affected our turnover rates. Bringing new employees in the onboarding process, very expensive. And especially first-year turnover, something we weren't managing well at all. Our stakeholder relationships are in jeopardy in the market like we have. It's not just the customers, it's not just the people calling, but it's also the fire departments. They respond to your home, and for those of you, just a quick explanation. So we have what's called a 2-tiered response system. The fire department staffs stations. They're there to protect the structures, and then, you know, 30, 40 years ago, the decision was made that they would fold emergency medical services in because that helps make it sustainable. If they just wait for a fire all the time, it's not an event that occurs very often, and so now you're staffing and paying people for something that doesn't happen a lot. But having them close to your neighborhood made a huge difference. The volunteer model where they paged everybody in, they found that a lot of structures were burned to the ground by the time they got everything to the side. Now they have great response times and they fold an EMS in. We are the transport ambulance, so 911 transport response. We show up with the fire department, who may staff EMTs or paramedics depending on the configuration, and then we're the ones that basically will take over patient care and take you to the hospital. Where that gives us a huge advantage over the fire department is they build stations, and stations don't have wheels, right? The stations are designed to protect the structures, but the population moves during the day. You and I wake up, go to work somewhere else, right? Work all day, go home somewhere else. Summer hours, we may change our patterns. We may be out later doing things. Certain areas in the city, in our city, as you know, a little more active at nighttime than they are during the day. And so the ambulance with our dynamic staffing pattern has the ability to flex with that population change that the fire department does not. So unfortunately, we hadn't been paying close attention to that. And so there was a lot of contention between the fire department and ambulance service. And because we had that negative management culture, from the executive level, our previous director basically said, if they don't like the service we're providing, I'm not real concerned. We're it. Not what I would call a strong business model in terms of planning for future success. Also, our performance metrics weren't being met. Under our accreditation, which we carry a CAS accreditation, it's a National Ambulance Service accreditation. We hadn't met our performance metrics in so long, we no longer had them in the evals. When I had started there 14 years ago, that was a part of your evaluation. Because the senior team didn't understand staffing patterns and some of the other tools very well, we just stopped even talking about it. Again, not a real solid business model. So, because that wasn't enough in terms of challenges, our management team is former clinical employees. None of them had a process improvement or a manufacturing background. We're all paramedics, and so clinical care and making sure the patients are taken care of is what drives us. We don't have a background for employee satisfaction or managing headcount or some of the other things that we need to be good at. We had a static schedule rather than a dynamic schedule, which does not work well because our industry has seasonal variability. It's fortunately for me and us, very predictable. You know, we're going to see at the end of October, we'll see a 130 call a week drop, and that'll stay that way all the way through February, where it'll go up about 180 calls and sustain that all the way through summer. With that in mind, we can't staff the same, right? We've got to be flexible. We've got to utilize PRNs. We have to have a float pool. We have to have people on call so that we can manage the schedule effectively for time of day, day of week. Those of you in management can certainly understand our overtime running 20 to 26%. A little bit expensive, a lot to do with that 6-digit budget shortfall. Something that we absolutely had to manage. And this goes back to employee satisfaction because we had forced overtime. So, you know, and people don't like that. You know, we ran 13-hour shifts, so it was 3 13s, and then every other week you had a fourth 13-hour day in a row. What we found is that was grinding people out. And that's just not a realistic workload for people in a clinical setting where they're out in an ambulance, they're exposed to the elements, there's a lot of stress related to the job, a lot of emotional stress, and also physical labor involved. And we were running them into the ground. And our senior leadership team did not adequately understand headcount. That is a key component, obviously, to us managing our people effectively, is knowing when to hire, when to use PTO, how many people are out on injury, what can we count on as call-offs, because a lot of that was predictable when we started looking at it. And we didn't have any idea. We, in fact, would get bogged down in discussions about, well, is a real person the same as an FTE? An FTE takes PTO and they do, no. We need to understand headcount. We don't know how many people we need in the door. We're not going to be able to balance any of these other things. And so that was one of the main areas of focus that we looked at for process improvement as well. So this was us. You know that feeling. I don't know if you can see that in the picture too well, but something's coming. And it was very clear from Presbyterian leadership that if we didn't get things aligned, that the days for Albuquerque Ambulance were probably going to be numbered. They love us, and they've devoted a significant amount of financial resources, time, and attention to us, including a brand new base.